Hey there, gang. So Randy Yellowcat asked me what my favorite albums were. And I was like, oh, okay, yeah, no problem. And then I was like, wait, does he mean my albums or my favorite albums of all time? So let's do both. I'm not presumptuous enough to think it's just my albums, but I actually think that my favorite albums of all time is just as important as whatever you want to know my favorites are of my own. So let's do that first. My favorite albums of all time, there's 5 I can list. And the first 3 I bought when I was 13 with the first $20 I earned from my paper route. I had a paper route, and I waited until I earned enough money so I could buy 3 albums that I really, really wanted at the time. Before that, my parents would always take us to buy singles. Singles were a really big deal when I was a kid. So this was like the moment for me where I went and slapped my $20 down and walked home with 3 albums. So those 3 albums were The Who, Live at Leeds. Man, my friends and I wanted that album so bad, and it was totally worth it. Still to this day, like everything wrapped up in a gigantic enigma package that I could want in music, from the angst and the energy and the attitude and the chaos and the mayhem and the great songs and the unpredictability. It's all there. In The Who, Live at Leeds, we wore that album out. So that was the first one I picked that day. The second one was because it was a very, very popular album at the time. There was a couple of really big singles on the radio in New York, and radio was super important for me and my friends because we didn't have a lot of money, and we were just taping things off the radio all the time and religiously sitting there like with our ears to it. And so the second album was Paul Simon, There Goes Rhymin' Simon. And it had Kodachrome and Loves Me Like a Rock, as well as other many amazing songs. I mean, Paul Simon, in a way, is bigger than Dylan. I don't mean he's better than Dylan, but I think he might be richer because think about like that Dylan's songs are amazing and he's written 600 songs in his lifetime and they're iconic. But think about how important and into our consciousness and hits, right? Everlasting hits of Paul Simon, Simon Garfunkel, and on his own. He's also had one of the more amazing careers. I mean, Simon and Garfunkel were really big. Then he left, they split, and he had a period of success pretty soon on his own, then went down, and then everybody thought he was done. I mean, people really thought he was done back then. Then he came back, then he went down again, like with One Trick Pony and stuff like that. And then Graceland. I mean, it's pretty incredible career, and I think it's because he's an amazing songwriter and always will be. So that was the second album, Paul Simon, There Goes Rhymin' Simon. And I still had enough money to grab a third album, but only if I got a cutout. Remember cutouts? That was when there was a little notch in the sleeve of an LP and you could get it for $1. And I had a little bit more than $1 left, but I figured I only have enough for a cutout because like a regular record was $3.99, I think at the time. $3.99. Those days are gone. So I was looking around and I took a chance on a record called Giuseppe Logan More on ESP disc. And the irony is, it's not my favorite Giuseppe record, but I would end up working with Giuseppe 40 years later. Who'd have thunk? So that was a pretty important moment for me to go, whoa, what was this? Like that was my introduction to free jazz and improvisation and, expansive music. So those were the first 3 I bought with my own money, and they'll always be really, really important. Now, albums 4 and 5 were by the same artist, but they were so impactful. They were the records that influenced me to have a career as a songwriter and as an artist. And the first one is, and it's my number one record of all time. So this record's number one and Live at Leeds is number two, because I'm not giving them to you in any particular order, but this record, Live at Leeds, and then the second record I'm about to tell you. And that record is Darkness on the Edge of Town by Bruce Springsteen. Now, I was working in my high school radio station. Yes, my high school had a radio station. It was a posh high school. And a lot of people who ended up in the music business worked there. My friend Pete Robinson, who lived around the corner from me, became a publisher for Dave Matthews and many other people. He still lives in Nashville. Derek Simon became a very important music executive in Nashville. Josh Rosenthal started Tompkins Square Records. The head of Sony Music went to my high school and worked in the radio station. Judd Apatow worked in the radio station. Yes, Judd Apatow, the filmmaker. He worked at the radio station, and I worked at the radio station. Now, Natalie Portman also went to our high school. I don't know if she worked at the radio station. She was in my sister's class, like 10 years behind us. But anyway, so working at the radio station was very important if you were interested in music, and it was a rite of passage. And when I was in ninth grade, when I was a freshman, they didn't care about us. You know, the seniors, like, I don't even think they knew we were there. We were just like cutting copy and emptying garbage pails and stuff. And then one night, the station manager, Dave Lebo, who was a senior, says to me, "Hey, I've got tickets to a show. My buddy canceled on me. Do you want to go?" And I'm like, oh my God, Dave Lebo's talking to me? This is great. So I'm like, yeah. What's the show? Not even thinking that, like, we can't afford whatever it is. Because, you know, there were 6 kids. I was the oldest of 6. And yeah, money was tight. Money was tight in the Pedersen household. So I was like, yeah, I want to go. Who is it? Bruce Springsteen. And at the time, the only thing I knew by Bruce Springsteen, or any people, even at the radio station, was Born to Run. He was in this battle with his manager for 3 years and hadn't released another record. So in the time that Born to Run came out, like in 75, you know, that's really when my music interest was developing. So, like, yeah, it was kind of under the radar for me. You know, I was listening to like Return to Forever and stuff, and, you know, jazz stuff, which we'll get to my jazz favorites in another video, because there are jazz records that were very, formative for me, but we're just talking about top 5 here. And so, I was like, yeah, I want to go. So I went home and asked my parents, and miraculously, and I mean miraculously, I expected them to say no. They said yes. And it was $17.50. They gave me a $20 bill. Okay, I'm going, right? I went to the show. From the moment that show started, from the first freaking note to the last, which echoed in my brain for years, I was completely stunned, flabbergasted, thrilled, and amazed. And I was like, okay, this is what I'm going to do, right? Because I went home and it was really late because Springsteen plays 3.5 hours, right? So I went home and my mom was still up. Like, she wouldn't usually be up at like 1 o'clock in the morning. And it was really late for me. I was a kid, you know, I was in by 10. And my mom's like, oh, I was really worried about you. And I looked at her and I said, Mom, I know what I want to do with the rest of my life. And she's like, what that? And I'm like, rock and roll. And she's like, that's nice, dear. Pets me on the head and goes off to bed. Little did she know the hell that was about to rain. So Darkness on the Edge of Town. Bruce had played a lot of that album at that show, a lot, like early in the show, like half of it. And then that was it. I went and bought every Bruce Springsteen record the next day. And Darkness didn't come out till a few months later. This was in June of 78, I would say, right? And so it didn't come out till a few months later. But I ended up seeing him a few more times. I've met him a few times. The boss. What are you going to do? But my second favorite record, that would be the number 5 record that I haven't mentioned yet, is also by the boss, Nebraska. Nebraska is an unbelievably perfect artistic achievement. The songs are bulletproof. They tell a cohesive artistic story. There's an arc to it, whether he intended it or not. It's just a perfect album. There's a vibe, there's a feel, there's a painting, there's a picture there, there's a movie. And anytime you have an album that you can close your eyes and you see the movie, it doesn't get better than that. So those are my top 5 records of all time. And if you want, I'll talk about the jazz ones later. Now, Randy, my friend, if you meant my albums, that's pretty easy. So Somewhere South of Here. That was technically my second album because my first album was meant to be demos and not to be released. It somehow got handed from a friend of mine to somebody else, to then somebody else at a record label who put it out. I don't know. But anyway, Somewhere South of Here, my second album, was a proper record where I was like, okay, I'm writing songs for a record. The record label was like, get a band. You know, the first record was all acoustic, pretty much by myself with Dave Kincaid helping out from the Brandos. Thank you, Dave. Thank you, Dave, for starting this mess. He's a genius. So the label said, get a band. And I'm purposely writing songs for that album, for that band, for the purpose of making a commercial record. And I think I nailed it. I'm not being bold about this. I listen to the songs now 30 years later and I'm like, I wrote that? You know what I mean? Like, wow, I was young. I'm like, how did I do that? That's pretty deep, you know? So I'm pretty happy with Somewhere South of Here. Yeah, could we have like recorded it better if we weren't high as kites some of the time? Could it have been mixed and mastered better at the time? If we had more money, there was $6,600 to make that album. I am not kidding you. So we had to like get into a studio and work for like 20 hours straight, which is not the best way to go about it. And cram it in really fast. And we didn't rehearse enough, but blah, 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 blah. It's still great. It's still great. I'm very, very proud of that record. And especially the way it stands today, where we got to include the extra song that the label didn't want to wait for back at that time. See, the label I didn't realize this, the label got money from the parent company every time they released a record, who got money from the distributor. So they had to release records. They almost didn't care what the records were. They just wanted to keep going and pay their salary. So they needed records. And of course, they weren't just going to sign anybody. I get it. But and they wanted those records to be successful. But they had to meet a deadline so that they would get that money. And we wanted to put one more song on it, and that song turned out to be really great, If I Tell You, which is on the record now when you get it. So anyway, If I Tell You's on there, Somewhere South of Here, check it out. My second favorite album is no surprise. It's I Curse the River of Time, because that album is the most complete album of songs with intent, meaning everything I intended to do, from the sound, from the songs, from the players, from the album order to the album itself, the look, the artwork, the book, the presentation, everything about that album to me is perfect. I would not do one note differently. I'm extremely proud of it, and it, you know, it was successful. So I'm not proud because it was successful. I'm proud because I wrote really, really good songs that I don't think I could improve on, and the production was exactly what I wanted to do, and everything fell into place. So I Curse the River of Time is my second favorite record of all time. And yeah, I wouldn't change anything. I think you'd all enjoy that. Now, there are other albums of mine I still like, I still love. I love the Black Country record. I shouldn't forget the Black Country record, because that record from start to finish is a complete artistic achievement, and every song is great, and it's exactly what we wanted to do, but it took 17 years to come out. It only came out, last year, I think, last July or something. So I don't even think a lot of people have heard that. And it only came out on vinyl and streaming so far. I think you can download it, but you can't get it on CD. Maybe that'll change next year. I'm thinking about doing that myself because I own the rights to it, so I can do that. We'll see. But I think the Black Country record's really good. And I think there are songs on the New Punk Blues that are excellent. The problem with the New Punk Blues is I wanted to make one type of record. I had moved to Nashville. I had brought I'd started the production on that back up north. But I'd only gotten maybe halfway through, and I finished it in Nashville, and I had a particular intent for it, and the record label got involved, and I'm grateful someone got involved and said, yeah, we're behind you, but they kept having me change it. They wanted me to put political songs on it because I had written 2 political songs, and they thought they were good, but I thought it was artistic death to put those songs on the album rather than just release them separately as singles or as a 2-piece thing, separately, little, A and B side thing, even if it was digital. And they kept pushing me to do a more Americana thing, and I want to do a power pop thing. Anyway, there are songs on that record that I think are very, very worthy, and I wish I could re-record some of that stuff. But one song that I have no regrets over, I think it's the best song I ever wrote. I'll never write another song this well again, and it's June 1945. Fun fact about June 1945, my publicist at the time, who was an excellent publicist and has been doing this for a really long time, wanted me to leave it off the record. And meanwhile, that's the song I made the most money off of that record. And it's the best song I ever wrote. And when I play that song live, even though it's this simple little quiet folk song, the room goes boom. Just people stop talking, they stop breathing, they stop rattling their drinks, like silence when I play that song. So there are a few on the New Punk Blues, like June 1945, Chelsea, Tabitha, the song I wrote about a little girl who went missing in Nashville just before I got there, I think. I think it was about a year before I moved there, and they still haven't found her. So there's a few songs on that record. But again, somewhere south of here, I Curse the River of Time and the Black Country. Now that said, if I may, next year, I think in June, my friend Gary Heffern and I, Gary was the lead singer-songwriter of The Penetrators out of San Diego, very famous band for 40 plus years. He now lives in Finland, and he and I found out at the same time that we were both Sami, except he was born in Finland, as was his sister, as a very large Sami family, and were sort of kidnapped by American missionaries and adopted and brought back to America. It all might have been legal at some point, but Gary didn't find out till he was in his 50s that this occurred. And that was at the same time that I found out that I was Sami. And we decided to write an album about it. And it's Gary Heffern and Ed Pedersen, The Midnight Suns. And if you want to know what album is perfect after I Curse the River of Time, it's The Midnight Suns. I am not kidding, and I'm not saying that because that's our next record or anything. It's perfect. It's absolutely, I wouldn't change a note. Every song, bulletproof in my opinion, if I may be so bold, and it will be coming out next June. So that's the lowdown, all right? And it's getting light, woohoo! All right, I got to get more coffee. Thanks, gang, and thanks for asking, Randy.